All right, everyone. Hello. My name is Dakoba, and welcome back. This is another one-button rotation sequence. This is for Holy Paladin. It is the healer I have found works best with this. I've been playing around with Holy Priest as well, but Holy Paladin has just been rocking for me. I've been able to do keys up to 7 with this, and that is pretty good for what it is. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Now, in terms of gearing up, you want to run haste and mastery as your two primary stats. I like to do a lot of extra haste. I think most people would say I have too much haste, but it's working for me. So, but you might be able to push a little further if you do a little bit more balanced statting. In particular, I don't have very much verse, so I'm a little bit squishier than some other players might be. Again, I've been able to heal up through a 7 without any issues, and so that is how this goes. And here you have the healing done from a recent key that I ran, 675k HPS. So you can see that we're putting out good numbers with where we're at. But haste and mastery are my statting there, and that's also, as it were, the statting for Ret, which I also play quite a bit. It's also important to get your 4-piece, so you'll want to make sure you're using your catalyst charges for those if you can, and you want to have a couple of good trinkets. The Unbound Changeling is really good. I haven't gotten a really great second trinket, so I'm using the Vial of Khalidi Vial, and that's okay. You know, if we go into that healing, we can see that that is 1.8% of my healing, which, you know, I don't love. I would love to see more of that, but it is what it is. So that's just how trinkets go. And then I'm not actually using very much crafted gear. I've used my crafting gear for Ret, so I do have the Everforged fan braces. So those are well statted and stuff. But it's the Nerubian enchant. But I don't have an enchant that it sort of plays off of for Holy Spec. My weapon is the other one, and I haven't made a Holy weapon yet, which is probably my next craft once I get another shard, because I'm still using a veteran weapon. But that's how it goes. In terms of rotation, this is another gnome sequencer sequence. So if we go in and we take a look at that sequence, now I'm not the author of this sequence. I didn't write this, but I'll post a link to it below. So all credit to Papa's12 for writing the sequence, but I have looked through it. I have tweaked it a little bit, and I'll walk through my modifications so you guys can see those and see how it goes. But I'm using the same talent build and base sequence as how it goes. Now, as far as playing it, when you get into a key, you go ahead and focus on your tank. If you're in a delve, you can focus on Bran if you want to play Holy in a delve for some reason. And then you put your beacons on 2 DPS, and you prefer 2 range DPS if you can, because your melee heals are going to be sort of naturally stronger because of mastery. And so 2 range DPS. If you don't have 2 range DPS, just chuck the second one on another DPS there. And then always make sure you're in melee combat, hitting something, and running the sequence. Now, to run the sequence, you'll bind it to a key, and you'll tap that key over and over again. And what that's going to do, the first time you tap the key, it's going to cast this block. The next time, it's going to cast this block. The next time, it's going to cast this block. The next time, it's going to cast this block, and so on down the list. And when it gets to the bottom, it's going to jump back up here to the top. Now, if Consecration's on cooldown, that still counts as like trying to cast this, so it'll still move on to the next one. And that's sort of the trick for how this works, is that if you tap this quickly enough, then you can move through the entire sequence with a decent clip, and it'll work. Now, I tap around 4 times a second. I've got it bound on a thumb key on my mouse, so I'm just tapping it over and over again whenever I'm in combat, and it works. So around, again, 4 times a second, around 250 milliseconds there, if you want to try and emulate my playstyle. Now, it works through all of the spells in our core rotation, so our Consecration there, it pops Wings or Judgment, so you can remove this line if you want to save your Wings and use it at your own. It does move through our Blessings, and this is a reference to a Blessing macro, which I'll show you guys in a minute. It casts Crusader Strike, it casts Holy Shock at our focus, so we want to have our tank focused. And so this will Holy Shock the tank to dump some healing into him, and that will then echo onto your beacons. And then it casts Sacred Weapon on the focus as well. And then it casts Light of Dawn. And this is an area where I've played around with the macro. It can be improved. You can do Ward of Glory here on a mouse over, and then just keep your mouse over whoever needs healing the most instead of Light of Dawn. But I found that Light of Dawn is sort of a little bit easier to keep in your brain. You require less thought, less effort, and it still does a significant and sufficient amount of healing. Again, 675k HPS is nothing to sneeze at, and that's overall over the course of a dungeon. So certainly had some spikes above that and quite a bit of downtime as well. Now it casts Divine Toll on the player. Another Call to the Blessing macro, and when you have multiple macros like that where you have two entries for that Call to the Blessing, it's going to try it just a little bit more frequently. You do that when you want to make sure that you're hitting things pretty much as soon as they come off cooldown, so they get multiple shots with each pass through of the sequence in order to have a chance at activating, and that sort of increases their priority a little bit. Tries to cast Hammer of Wrath if you have it available, and then again Divine Toll on yourself, another Call to Blessing. It does fire off Aura Mastery. This is when I disable sometimes. I just click that disable button there, and that way I'm holding my Aura Mastery so that I can use it, which is a party-wide damage reduction if you're in the Devotion spec or Devotion Aura for that. And then just more working through the rotation in much the same way. It does cast Holy Prism as well. And that's another one that I'll sometimes disable because that's just a nice burst of AoE healing. It's not very strong on its own, but it's a nice little chunk that we can throw out. And so that is the rotation. As far as that Blessing macro, let me pull that up for you. Now, if you create this macro and want to use it that way in a sequence, it does need to be in your character-specific macros, and so you can see that that is here, and that is just cast at your focus, Blessing of Summer, cast at the player, Blessing of Autumn, cast at the player, Blessing of Winter, and cast at your target's target, Blessing of Spring. And so that is how that works. If we go ahead and line up on a training dummy here, I will show you guys how the macro works. And so we line up here on this dummy, and then we just start tapping that key over and over again. Now with this, because we're using Light of Dawn, that's a cone attack, or a cone heal rather. We want to point our camera and point our player at our group as best we can. Now obviously you need to watch your feet, but as a default, you're basically going to be treating this like you're a tank, and you can see I'm throwing some heals on those healing dummies there in the background as a result of that. And so this is more or less what the sequence looks like, and I'm again just tapping this on my thumb key, and it's doing all the work for it. This lets me focus on my feet, make sure I'm not standing anything, make sure I'm managing my interrupts, make sure I'm using my CCs and defensives. As far as other abilities outside of the macro, you can see I've got them on my bars. I click some, and then I've got my 12 buttons at the bottom bound to keys as well. So I've got my Blessing of Freedom, I've got my Lay on Hands, I've got my Divine Protection, which is just my personal, short-term AoE or defensive cooldown. So whenever an enemy is pulsing damage or a boss is pulsing damage, I just pop that one. That's on 4. I've got my Interrupt on 7. I put my Interrupt on 7 on every character. I've got my Cleanse on 9. I've got my Battle Res and my Mass Res for when I need those. And then for the other clickable macros, I've got my Stone Form, my Dwarf Racial. If you're not a Dwarf, highly recommend it. It's the best racial in the game, best race in the game. I got my Taunt if I need it. That's right next to my Blessing of Protection. So if a tank drops, I can hit Blessing of Protection, taunt the boss real quick, and then throw out a Battle Res to get the tank back up and tank in the meantime. That'll buy me a window of, 4 seconds in which to do that. So it's pretty tight timing, but it's a well-known trick. And then of course I've got my Divine Shield. You can also bop another player if they need it for some reason, but it's tricky. And then Blessing of Freedom, of course, if there is a root or snare or something to that effect, and Divine Steed for getting around. That's my bars. Let's go ahead and take a look at a key and see how this plays out. All right, now this is a pug key, and the tank started off with a really big pull. We weren't ready for it. Almost everybody died, but the tank just charged in and pulled the first 3 packs, which is a common tactic. Usually you want to lust if you're doing that, but there wasn't a lot of communication. This is completely a pug, totally random players, didn't talk with them at all, and so things are tricky. But that's how it goes sometimes, and we managed to finish the dungeon, so it was not the worst pug I've been in. Not even the worst pug in this week, or maybe not even in the last couple days. But you can see I've got my beacons here on the shaman and on the priest, or on the warlock, and I am standing more or less at the tank, trying to point my camera so that my light of dawn hits those ranged in the back as best I can. But the priority is really just focusing on watching your feet, making sure you're always in melee, and doing mechanics properly, and that's going to get you through at least the champion level keys and up to about a 619 item level. Very, very easily. Now this boss, it has a healing mechanic check on it. That's he does a ability called Seismic Smash, and whenever that Seismic Smash comes out, it's the tank buster. Here he's casting it now, and the first one there's nothing you can do. The tank's just going to get chunked there. Fortunately, he was ready and did not die there. But now he has a dot on him, and the tank gets a dot when that Seismic Smash comes out. When you dispel that dot, it gives the tank a 50% damage reduction for 6 seconds, and you want that active for the next Seismic Smash. So you can see that I dispel the tank as soon as I see the boss start to cast that Seismic Smash again, and that is how that mechanic works. Outside of that, whenever the DPS breaks pillars with their lasers, that's going to hurt, and then the lasers do a bit of damage as well. So you've just got pulsing, widespread AoE damage here. And so again, we're just doing our rotation, counting on our smart healing to do this. This is a 6 key, so not the highest level of key, but nothing small either. And we've got pretty good damage, so things are going well, and the DPS are mostly doing mechanics properly. I think there's a little bit of confusion on Skarmorak, which we'll see here in a minute. And so this fight continues to go pretty smoothly. Nothing really happens here. So let's fast forward through it. All right, now the tank pulls the Void Despoiler here. These things hurt, so I say to use defensive cooldowns when they're doing their AoE, which is just a brutal AoE those adds do. And the tank is sure in a hurry in this group. This is, one of the risks of doing a pug is that not everybody's necessarily going to be going at the pace. As a healer, you just have to do your best to keep up. You're not the star of the show. That's usually the DPS, and your job is to keep them alive. To that point, you want to be doing, let's slow things down a little bit. You want to be doing as many interrupts and CCs as you can. And so you can see I popped an interrupt there on the Tune speaker because his censoring gear is a silence that you don't want to get hit with. And then mostly, like I said, I'm just trying to point my camera at my group as best I can and help with defensives and things like that wherever I'm able to. Now, we did run into a little bit of trouble on this group. We did run into a little bit of trouble in that group. I got clipped by a swirly, so that's on me. I can see that my weapon is hurting a little bit, but that's okay. We pick things up, and tank checks my mana, which is good. Good tanking on him. Always make sure your healer has mana if you're tanking. And then we pull the boss. Now, we did run into some trouble on this boss. We popped 2 shards at once, and that knocked me down, and then 2 more players dropped very quickly right after that. And so we reset. I noticed my gear was broken, so I popped out to run out and repair real quick. So just do that. So that's a mistake I made. I didn't come in fully ready, fully prepared. Make our way back to the boss and go ahead and start the pull. Now, I don't think the DPS understand the orb mechanic because they're just leaving them on the ground there. You want to make sure that each DPS picks up 2 orbs. So there's 5 orbs in each wave. 2 sets of waves comes out. Ideally, you want 2 apiece, or 1 from each wave apiece. Since no one was taking them, I started picking up 2 in the first wave and 1 in the third wave. It is a dot on the player who has the debuff, but it significantly buffs your damage against Skarmorak's absorb shield, and for the healer and tank, it buffs your healing, and that is critically important because there's a lot of damage coming out there. And then both as the tank and as the healer, you want to make sure that you're dealing that or able to survive that damage, able to heal through it. And so the fight from that point on goes pretty easy. That dark circle under him in that cast, I don't think it does any damage. So I've taken to standing in it because that means that I can get my consecration down and be well positioned for that. And I do type out that the orbs boost damage, so hopefully encourage the DPS to pick those up, because that last shield phase was pretty brutal, and I want them to be aware of that and know that that's important. Turns out not to matter. We don't even see another shield phase because we kill the boss, but such is how it goes. And then I take a second to type that out just to communicate with the group that that's what I want to see on that boss. And then we move on to the next pack. Tank runs in where the whole group's there. So I'm rushing to keep up. Try and get into melee range so I can start pumping out my heals. But things go pretty smoothly. This trash goes pretty easily. The forge loaders are the only dangerous one. The giant orb they spit out is a heavy dot, so you need to watch for that when you're healing your group, because any players who get hit by it, you can see the Paladin got hit by it there, is going to have that heavy dot that's ticking on him. And that's just something you need to sort of watch and heal through. Move ahead. As a dwarf, I would have preferred to go the other way. There's a ingot on the anvil in the corner on the far side of this room that gives 10% versatility, which I would have loved to have, but it happens. So there we see the shaman got clipped, so I go ahead and sacrifice, blessing and sacrifice them, which causes me to take a portion of that dot, but helps keep them alive, and the warlock gets hit as well. Nothing I can do for it, so I specifically target them, start pumping a few extra heals, and I'll make sure I'm hitting them with a couple Word of Glories, just to keep them alive. That's why I have Word of Glory as my 5 key, and it's a mouse over macro, so that as I'm doing my rotation, there's going to be a window between when I hit 3 Holy Power and the Light of Dawn is cast. You can see I'm sitting capped on Holy Power frequently, and I can spam my 5 key instead of my rotation key whenever I see that I'm above 3 Holy Power, in order to spam a spot heal, and that is that technique there. All right, we move into this boss. This boss goes down pretty easily. Everybody does a pretty good job here. We do miss one interrupt, and so I end up bubbling just to avoid the dot from that, the molten metal, and to make sure everything's going okay. But for the most part, the fight goes pretty smoothly. Boss drops. So there, I saw my health was getting low. Saw the little speaker finishing his cast, so I went ahead and bubbled, and that was that. Head on back to the main hallway there and just start working on stuff. The warlock compliments me on my interrupts, and so I point out to the group that every interrupt is a heal that I don't have to heal. And that's true for every CC. Anything you can do to reduce the damage your group takes is functionally healing. And so that is a big part of what we do as healers. And as any class, if you want to be good at WoW, you should be using your defensives, using your interrupts and CCs, things like that. Make sure we're targeting down the totems here with these guys. I didn't think I was in anything on that one. So let me watch that one again. Let's slow it down a little. See, it looks on my screen. I must have just stepped right back in just that little bit right at the end. Oh, I was so frustrated when that happened, because I was sure I was out of it, but, check the tape. it keeps you honest. All right, so we move into the last boss, and this one is, again, things go pretty smoothly here. For the most part, this is a good group. We lose our Paladin on this last trash pack, and he releases before I can get a battle res out on him. But that's okay. It gives us time to finish things up. Yeah. All right, so then we move on to the boss. And with this boss, I like, as a tank, to just stand in my circle, drop my circle square in the center of the room and just run back into it, because it doesn't do very much damage as far as a tank can turn. It's like 250k HP or DPS, which is bad for anybody else, but for a tank, you don't really care. And our tank is also pretty chill about clearing his Void Corruption dot as well. Everybody else, you want to clear that as quick as you can. So whenever I see him casting that Void Corruption, I start heading to a portal in order to clear it. And it works out that I also managed to get out of the way for dropping my circle. And so it just comes down to managing the fight. And this macro, you can see it's just pumping out a ton of, you know, smart passive heals all the time, and doing a really great job on making sure everybody stays topped up. As long as you've got your beacons on the targets who are going to need the most babysitting, you're gonna do fantastic. And so I love the sequence and how easy it makes healing. Now, whenever you play a sequence like this, you know, obviously there's going to be a ceiling, a cap on what you can do with it. I think that for Holy Paladin and played in this way, that cap's probably around a 6 or 7. You know, I was able to heal my first 7 at around a 608 item level. I'm up to 614 now and haven't really pushed beyond that. And maybe I will as I get a little bit more gear. But ultimately, this kind of sequence is fantastic for people who are disabled or who otherwise can't keep up with the modern pace of the game. You know, they've changed WoW to require even the simplest and sort of slowest paced classes are still 80 to 100 actions per minute. So that's, you know, 1.5 things per second that you have to be doing in order to play at these sort of mid to high level keys. And that's really hard for some of us older folks or people who again are disabled in some way or other to keep up with. And that's where this gnome sequencer sequences really shine, as they let you push into content that's a little bit trickier. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you have, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. My name is Dakoba, and I hope you have an efficient day. I'll see you soon.